delighted to have in the studio today Sean Gayer. Sean, you're VP of Operations for EMEA Manufacturing at Boston Scientific. So welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, Anne. It's great to be here.
Well, look, I'm excited to get into some of your story. But before that, just for our listeners, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about, I mean, it's a massive organisation, but tell us a little bit about Boston Scientific globally today.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you to get into the Irish operations a little bit because you have a very significant presence here.
Yes, thank you. So Boston Scientific is a global medical device company founded in 1979. Last year we had revenue of 20 billion. We have a presence in 127 countries, 59,000 employees, and we treat 48 million patients annually with our devices. So its mission is to transform lives through innovative medical solutions that will improve the health of patients around the world. So really impactful work. And we focus on minimal invasion technologies that will help employees. So that's us globally.
And then tell us a little bit about the Irish operations,
Yeah.
and because you're all across the various counties, aren't you?
Yes, so we have 3 manufacturing sites in Ireland, Galway, Clonmel and Cork. So Galway is our largest site, workforce of over 4,000. Cumulatively, we have a workforce of 8,000 approximately in Ireland. Galway make cardiovascular products. They make, one of the products they make is a Watchman product, which is a stroke prevention product placed in the heart that reduces the risk of a clot and the need for lifelong blood thinners. Clonmel then does a completely different business, which is active implantables. They will give you a defibrillator or a pacemaker. And they also make a deep brain stimulation device that's used for the treatment of Parkinson's. Wow. It sends signals to the brain that helps reduce the tremor impact on Parkinson's. And Cork then make products that are used in the treatment of cancer. Catheters to get access to the body, coils which are used to stop blood flow to a cancer tumour, and also arthrectomy products that will drill out calcified plaque in your arteries. Cork make a product called Rotablader, which rotates at 160,000 revs per minute and will drill out calcified plaque in your arteries, reducing the need for more significant surgery. So all 3 sites produce really a wide range of products across the range of portfolio offered globally.
And Galway had a big investment announcement recently.
Galway had a big announcement last week. Congratulations to all the team in Galway. 75 million investment in R&D capabilities. And that again, in the cardiovascular space, and that again shows, the value that the site can create, both from a manufacturing, quality and new product development perspective.
Yeah, and I love seeing that, that growth in the product development happening in Ireland is always a great story.
Yes,
and
indeed.
It's lovely to see Boston Scientific doing it. I'll come back to Boston Scientific, but I want to come to yourself, Sean. For those who don't know you, you don't have the most traditional of backgrounds to end up in an organisation like Boston Scientific in a leadership role. So tell me a little bit about your journey to here.
Yeah, it's my journey is through the finance route. So I did BCom in UCC, 4 great years in UCC. Could have been a student all my life, but there would have been some financial implications. I trained and qualified in PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then my first role in industry was with a company called Millipore, now Merck, in Carrigtwohill. And the learning from that was my manager at the time sat down with me and said, you can be a scorekeeper or team player. You'll have more fun being a team player. Go down to the production floor, understand what's influencing and driving the numbers. And once we understand that, we'll be able to drive improvement in the numbers. So that was a key learning that, as you saw as you did your monthly accounts, as you did in the finance department, you'd go down and talk to the folks on the production floor to understand what were the challenges they had and how then we could work together to remove the barriers, see what opportunities we could avail of. That manager then left Millipore and joined a hearing healthcare company called Resound Corporation, and he was looking for a cost accountant. And I joined him as the cost accountant. And I truly enjoyed, again, going down on the production floor, understanding the business. And the learning I got in that company was we had a significant challenge in component control. If you can imagine, for hearing aids, the components are all really small. And it was when we started working with the teams to understand, as you mapped the product through the process, where were the challenges, and the teams came up with tremendous ideas as to how to solve some of those challenges. And we had significant improvement by leveraging off the teams. And at that time, a more traditional accounting approach might be more paper and more signatures, we'll do more control. But by actually working with the people at the coalface, and it's a principle I've kept with me all the time in my career since, if there is an issue, go see. You come across it in Shingo, when they call it Gemba, but go to see where the problem is. Go down and talk to the people. Everyone comes to work to do a good day's work. People rarely get out of bed in the morning and say, do you know what, not today. You might do it later on in the afternoon, but rarely in the morning. And just understand what are the challenges that the team have in trying to do their daily work, and then how you can help in that. When I left Resound, I went to an ICT company, and that was a customer-facing role. It was in the telecommunications business, so I was meeting AT&T in America, T-Mobile, Vodafone, and it helped me understand the end-to-end supply chain and getting a product, through your supply base, through manufacturing, and to the end customer. And then I landed in Boston Scientific in 2013 as the finance director. And in 2015, the Cork site lead role became available, and I was successful in applying for that. And 2 years ago, there was a regional European role, as you mentioned, and I successfully applied for that. So yes, the finance route is interesting, but again, it's about utilising the talent that you have available, understanding, clearly the areas I would need support on as we go through would be the technical side. But, I did physics and chemistry in the leaving, and I'm not afraid to ask the questions. But understanding as well that the people who are doing the work, who are at the coalface, has more knowledge than the rest of us, and let's understand their perspective before we decide on anything else.
So that was an incredible piece of advice, that first manager of yours who said, get down there on the floor, because it makes so much sense. Yeah, so that I love that, that it stayed with you, clearly.
Yes,
and probably, got you to where you are to some extent.
I was an accountant and who had too much interest in operations. That's how I ended up where I ended up.
And this is the cure, exactly.
Yes.
And tell me then, have you... Well, actually, John, I'm going to get into the leadership side, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So you've had various leadership roles, and this particular role at the moment probably most relevant. Some of what you've told me already gives me a sense of your style of leadership, probably. But tell me, in your own words, what you think good leadership looks like.
When I was site lead in Boston Scientific Cork, we successfully challenged for the Shingo Prize. And at the time, their model really resonated with me, because at the top of the triangle was, what's the North Star of your company? I outlined the mission of Boston Scientific, which is to transform lives through medical innovations. So what's the North Star of your company? And we landed after discussing that quite a lot within Cork, we landed on we positively impact patients' lives. We deliver devices for patients. That's our North Star. That's what we do. Everything we do, the patient is at the center of what we do. And then at the bottom of the triangle was, your cultural enablers, which was lead with humility and respect every individual. And they're the two I focus on as a leader. The pieces in the middle, we have teams of engineers who can lean out a process, who can make sure that our operations are optimal. But and sometimes as leaders, we have a bias for action. We want to fix it. But if we can take the time to define the problem statement to the team, emphasize why that problem is important, and relate it back to the mission and purpose of the company, the team will invariably come up with a more robust solution than you will, even with your leadership team, possibly, because you have built that solution from the ground up. And one of the greatest pieces of feedback that I received was when someone said, "You forgot we cared about the place as much as you do." And it's a really good piece of feedback because we're on meetings and we're engaging with other people throughout the corporation. The people that are working in the company care about the place every bit as much as any of the rest of us. I joined Boston Scientific Cork in 2013. There was people who were there, 10 years when I joined. They had met their life partner. They had a family that they were managing through their work patterns. Why would they not care about the place as much as I did? And it's a great piece of feedback, and back to everyone comes to work to do a good day. It's our job is to make sure that we understand the challenges that people have and how we can remove those challenges to continually drive improvement in our organisations.
And tell me, our partners on the podcast are IDA Ireland, who I suspect you know well and have worked with for many years. Tell us a little bit about the relationship and, maybe outside the obvious of how IDA support a large organisation like yours. Are there other ways in which they support you?
Well, we work with the IDA across 4 areas. One, innovation. You mentioned the announcement last week in Galway. We work with them across all 3 sites on innovation. The second one is sustainability. We have a plan for our manufacturing plants to be carbon neutral from a Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions before 2030. Clonmel is there. Galway are almost there, and Cork are midstream. So we work that sustainability program through the IDA. Digital, obviously a big area. We're looking to see how we can, get into smarter manufacturing, connected factories, predictive data analytics. As we work through that program, we find, the IDA are a really strong partner in that program. And then lastly, talent. I mentioned we have a workforce of 8,000 people. I presented to the board of directors in Boston Scientific 2 years ago, and I said to them at the time that the only number on the sheet that I'd like you to remember, and at that time it was 65,000, it's over 70,000 now, 70,000 years of knowledge that we have available every day from our workforce in Boston Scientific Ireland. It places a bit of a responsibility on the leadership to make sure we use that correctly and maximise what we can do. But it's perhaps our greatest asset. Not perhaps, it is our greatest asset. So from a talent perspective, we work with the IDA, and they're great partners in creating that advanced manufacturing and innovation ecosystem. With their supports to constantly improve our capability and skill sets as we look to go forward, because clearly we can't stand still.
given what Boston Scientific does, I mean, you're looking for some really smart people. You're looking for quite a few of them, I would imagine. And also you're looking to retain great talent, I suppose. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the first thing about our brand is quite strong, thankfully, and our brand is driven by our existing employees. We do meaningful work. We make products that positively impacts patients' lives. We have an environment that's respectful. We drive a culture whereby we strive to create an open and honest environment where trust and respect prevails. Because we believe the combination of the culture and the nature and powerful impact of the work is what retains people. You can also build a long-term contract in Boston Scientific. I joined as an accountant in finance and ended up in site lead in Cork and now regional lead for EMEA. And there's loads of stories about how people, have created long-term careers within Boston Scientific. And we're a company that are happy to invest in people's future. We invest in people's skill sets. I have gone on a number of training courses within the company as I progressed through my career. So we have a high retention rate within the company. And we believe that meaningful work together with that inclusive, respectful culture and then that opportunity to progress your career and investing in people, with various mentorship programs that help. When I started in Boston Scientific first, I was assigned a buddy. But, I joined as finance director. My buddy was an engineering director. And it was amazing the impact, like he would swing by, make sure I was okay. Is there anything that I needed? Did I understand everything? And really help the integration into the company. So we would certainly pride ourselves on our employee engagement, pride ourselves on our inclusion. And we have engagement and inclusion groups within the company that are employee-led. And they create strong connectivities across the sites, the communities, the region. Really people-orientated company.
Love it. It's great. I think sometimes people don't talk enough about the retention side of things. They're all out looking for talent, but my gosh, if you can retain the best talent, there's something about that. There's something very powerful about that.
Absolutely. You don't want to train people to see them leave the company for whatever reason. So how we can illustrate to our talent the future path ahead for their career is really important for us.
I'm glad you said that because it's kind of the next thing I want to talk to you about because I'm very keen to look to the future. I mean, it's a very exciting time. So there's kind of two sides to that. There's the side of, the incredible innovation that's going on in human health and medical devices, etc. And then, of course, there's all the other stuff, the AI and digital and smart manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit about the future and what to watch out for.
Well, I think, again, the first thing is if we go back to the patient, we're living longer. It's a good thing. I was looking at the 1926 census there recently.
We were just talking about it.
I think it's late 50s was the average life, was your average lifespan. Now it's early 80s. So, 20 plus years and 100 years, that's probably going to continue. That's putting enormous stress on health systems, as we see. So from a health system perspective, how we, productivity and efficiencies. So I think what you're going to see in health systems is AI being used for early detection and decision making. You'll see robotic assisted surgeries. And you will also see, remote patients, virtual wards. I was driving to Galway this week and I think St. Vincent's had 37 patients in their virtual ward. That's patients that are recovering at home. but their key vitals and statistics are being monitored by a team of nurses in the ward, despite the fact that patients are at home. So I think and I think from the report, the patients are actually quite pleased to recover at home and be monitored and have that service available to them. So I think you're going to see any innovation that will help take the stress off the traditional health system, as we would call it. From a manufacturing perspective, I think we're still looking at resiliency of supply chains post-COVID.
Yeah, no kidding.
And sustainability of those supply chains. And then it's how we use our AI technology tools within our manufacturing base to continue to drive that smarter manufacturing, where we're connecting pools of data and making it into relevant, timely information so that people can make more data-based informed decisions. And that work continues. And lastly, across the wider industry, I think there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the industry. I think that's going to continue. Boston Scientific earlier this year in January announced the agreement to acquire Penumbra in a pretty significant deal. That's going through the required approvals at this point in time. But, we would certainly envisage that activity would continue as we look into the future.
I think that's a great point on which to wrap up. I do like to end on looking forward. So, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. There's so much more I could ask you, but we shall talk again, I sincerely hope, Sean. Thank you so much.
Not at all, and thank you very much for having me.